Hi everyone, welcome to Chapter 9. I have attempted this many times to record this, and I keep recording lectures that are too long for my little piece of software here, and I'm having to repeat it. So what I'm going to do is record this in 3 sections, and hopefully that will solve the problem of the system crashing. So I'm going to cover perfect competition in one, controlling competition in the next section, and then restrictions on competition. I may even divide that in 2 parts at the end, so there'll be a series of shorter videos instead of one long one. I just wasn't able to do the one long one. Okay, let's start with perfect competition. First, we're going to discuss that the idea of perfect competition is important to economics. Specifically, it's a microeconomic concept, but it is important in economics because it is an idealized situation and helps us understand economic concepts. We're going to cover different other types of competition later, different and other types. Perfect competition, and the book makes this point, really doesn't exist. The book kind of hints at that a little bit. But first, let's discuss what it is, and as we go, we'll discuss why it doesn't exist, and you'll also see why it's important to understand the ideal in order to help your understanding of economics as a whole. First, perfect competition has a larger number of buyers and sellers, so nobody possesses market power. So there's a large number of buyers and sellers in a specific industry, and this is common. This can happen. This is absolutely possible. In fact, most industries it is what is happening. Second, participants possess complete knowledge. So those selling in these markets possess complete knowledge of how everyone else does everything. There's no advantage in production or materials or recipes in the case of a food or a soda or something. There's no real competitive advantage. And that is pretty rare. Typically somebody has some insight in. I mean, there's some trade secret of production, specifically of production or materials or something. So that's kind of rare. Next is that the products are homogeneous, and this is where it gets very unrealistic. This means the products are the same, they're identical. There's no difference in products. And when you really think about it, it's hard to come up with an industry where this happens, where you have absolutely identical products. There are subtle differences in all products. That's why there's more than one. Because if everything was going to be exactly the same, there'd be no point in having more than one, other than pure price competition, in which case you're only going to have a couple. Remember, this goes back to the spaghetti sauce video, where you're told why people want different types of spaghetti sauce or coffee and all the mustard and everything else he talked about. We don't even know what we want until people tell us what we want. And so we have this tremendous demand for heterogeneous products, very different products. And so the homogeneous products, once again, very unrealistic. The only real example could be crops, potatoes, spinach leaves, something like that. But even then, there are subtle differences, and crops and farming is there's not perfect competition because of the last item, which is no cost in moving resources. The cost in moving the resources for a farm is pretty much impossible. You can't dig up a farm and move it. So it doesn't apply there. So this is why perfect competition doesn't exist. If a specific industry meets 2 or 3 of these, they're not going to meet the 3rd or 4th. But just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean that learning about perfect competition doesn't have value. Analyzing perfect competition and discussing perfect competition allows us to look at a perfect scenario without all of the variables that seem to come with economics. You're looking at the ideal, and from the ideal we gain knowledge of where the variables and the differences are. If we don't have a home base, an ideal, it becomes much more difficult to learn about the rest of the economy. So I encourage you to read that perfect competition section in your book a couple times. It's good stuff. And we'll move into, in the next video, we'll move into controlling competition.